Hi, I'm Peter Fisk. So Future Recoded is all about exploring futures of complex and relentless change. The big question which I think every business executive should be able to answer today is, how do you see the future? Have a view as to what is the future of your industry. Where is your organization going? And how can you create a better future for your business and for yourself? We live in a time of incredible change. We'll probably see more change over the next 10 years than we've seen over the last 250 years. Or Ray Kurzweil, the futurist, he says we'll probably see in the next 100 years over 20,000 years worth of change. But think about, 250 years. Think about, how has everything from the steam engine to the aeroplane changed the ways in which we do business, in factories, for example, and the ways in which we travel and which we're influenced by global cultures. Think about how the digital technologies of the last 25 years have transformed our lives, from the mobile phone to 3D printing technologies of today. We now live in a time which we call the fourth industrial revolution. And really what's interesting about the fourth industrial revolution compared to previous ones is it uses all of those technologies. All of the technologies like blockchain and Internet of Things and artificial intelligence and big data at the same time, and it connects them all together. And that's why it has so much more impact than ever before, the multiplying effect of connecting all those different capabilities together. But it's not just technology, it's actually connecting with humanity as well. So how can you almost create superhuman capabilities, be it in terms of the ability to make much smarter decisions with the help of artificial intelligence, or be it in terms of being able to do incredibly strong things with the help of exoskeleton robots, be you working in the army or in a shipyard, for example. So the fourth industrial revolution really is an accelerator of change. We see speed of change, accelerating all the time in so many different ways. And a great example of how businesses are responding to that is Satya Nadella. He's the CEO of Microsoft. When he came along to become the CEO in 2014, he was following in the steps of Bill Gates, the great entrepreneur. But then Steve Ballmer, who'd been very much the salesman, he'd been taking all the great products which Gates and team had created, and he'd been selling. So he'd been largely product focused, he'd been incremental. And actually, Microsoft as an organization had stagnated or has actually diminished in terms of its reputation and its position in the world. But Satya Nadella, he stood up. He's actually already worked for the company, but he stepped up and he said, I'm going to hit refresh. And that actually became the name of the book which he wrote a few years later. But what he meant by hit refresh was a new mindset for the organization. And he didn't change everything. But what he did say was we need a new way of thinking. And he took a model which came from a lady called Carol Dweck, which is called the growth mindset. And it's a very simple model. It says there's really two kinds of ways of thinking. There's the fixed mindset and there's the growth mindset. The fixed mindset is largely about saying, how can we continue as we are and get a bit better? So as a business, that might mean, you continue to do what you've always done, but you try to be a bit more efficient, or you try to improve the quality of it a bit, or you try to reach new customers and new markets with similar kinds of products. You're incremental. But a fixed mindset has also become scared of failure. It's really driven by that macho kind of ego to want to be right and to not to admit failure. And so the fixed mindset really is limited in terms of its ability to grow. The growth mindset, compared to that, is much more experimental. It says it's better to try something rather than to not to try. So try and fail is actually a good thing. because you can learn from it. So the growth mindset is really mind-opening in terms of what are the possibilities and how can you explore things from new perspectives and new places and things which you just never imagined yourself being in before. It's also incredibly empowering because it allows all of your people to be visionary in terms of where do they want to take things and how could they do things in new and different ways. What Satya Nadella says is actually that the skill today is not to know it all, but it's to learn it all. And we constantly, we're bombarded with so much information. There's so many things we could know, we could be experts of in the world today. It's very difficult to be the expert of anything. So instead, we need to be a discoverer. We need to explore, we need to understand where we can find things, and then we need to make connections and to use them in powerful and innovative ways. So using that growth mindset to really help you to move forwards with a more open mind. And a great example of somebody who's done that is Anne Wojcicki. She was working on Wall Street. She was an investment banking analyst, and she was focused on the healthcare sector. And she was reading some reports, and they said the future of healthcare is all about personalization. And personalization requires data. So what she did is she gave up her job working on Wall Street, and she moved to California. She set up a company called 23andMe, which looks at how can you decode the genetics of any individual. At that time, to process the human genome cost around $9,000. And by thinking smartly about how she could do the process and actually thinking you don't actually have to have all the information about the genetic code, you need the bits of information which are relevant to do people have certain diseases or likelihood of having them, then she actually reduced the cost from $9,000 to $900 and then over time to $99. So today in most countries around the world, you can pop into your pharmacy, you can get a test kit off the shelf, you spit into a tube, you send it off, and within 2 weeks, her company 23andMe will send you a report which tells you everything about your body. It tells you everything about your ancestry too, which is what lots of people buy it for. Everything about your body and what kind of diseases you might be prone to and how you can live a better life and perhaps even overcome some of those possibilities. What she's also done is to build a huge database of anonymous data which shows people's DNA, which is gold dust to pharmaceutical companies, for example, and also life insurance companies. But think about the holy grail of pharmaceuticals, to create personalized medicines where you could have a healthcare response to each person's individual symptoms. So she's now working with GSK and other pharmaceutical companies in how truly can you create a new generation of healthcare products and at the same time creating care advice for people to understand how can they live healthier and better quality lives. The real challenge today is to say, what is your potential? How can you see the future better? And if you're standing from one position, obviously you only have one perspective. So the real challenge is to step up and to take new positions by which you can see the world in different or bigger ways. And when you step up and have the courage to look at the world in a different way from today, that might mean stepping out of your traditional business. It might mean reading a new magazine than ever before, going to a country you'd never imagined going to, meeting people who you never imagined talking to. When you change your perspective, you see a different worldview. And that worldview tends to open up possibilities which you thought were impossibilities. And by then talking to other people, you start to build the confidence that those possibilities become plausibilities. And once they're plausible, they become part of your future potential as an individual, but also for your business. So leaders today really need to be far-sighted. It's an easy thing to say, it's hard to do. Most business leaders I know, myself included actually, is that we spend most of our time with our heads down. we're focused on today's world. We're actually looking backwards most of the time at what we did last year. We look at business results. Business results are of things which have already happened. It's last year's news. What we really should be looking at is what's going to happen next, because that's what we can change. And so being able to look forwards and being able to look further forwards than we normally do becomes really important, and particularly for the leaders of the organization. Whilst everybody else is perhaps really trying to make today work, to survive or to thrive in today's world, we really do need to depend on somebody to be looking at where we're going next and how we are actually going to get better at what we do, but actually how can we explore things which don't exist or we haven't even imagined yet. So being able to look at the future is really powerful, and trends or mega trends are a great way to do that. I looked across the world and I looked at all the things which are kind of driving change over the next 10 years, all the signals, all the fads, the fashions, but also the big things which are changing over the next decade. And to me, there's 5 big megatrends. They go A, B, C, D, E. A is for aging world. We see a world which is rapidly, the demographic pyramid is changing from where we live in a largely youthful world to a world where we have more older people than younger people. We live longer. Most people who are young today, under 30, will live to over 100 years. And therefore, by the time we get to what we used to call retirement, or 60 or 70, then actually we're still in our prime. And so we live longer. We hopefully live healthier lives too. But actually we need to think about, well, what do we do with all that time? But also, how do we support people when they're not earning money anymore? Through pensions, do we have sufficient pension funds to support that? And do we have the healthcare and support needs to help people as they get frailer? The second trend is booming Asia. If you look right now, the only real economies in the world which are growing are Asian economies, particularly the Chinese economy. But that huge shift from west to east is something which really is a powerful force, both in terms of where the new businesses are and the new ideas are coming from, but also where the markets are. In 2020, we saw the point where Asia now outperforms the rest of the world in GDP at purchasing power parity. The middle class of Asia are really where all the action is. Those people who've escaped from poverty, so they're the lower to middle class. They're people who have disposable income for the first time, which means they have dreams. They want to achieve more. They want to earn more. And they can make choices about brands and what they do with their money. So great opportunity areas for businesses all around the world. The third trend is cognitive technologies. So not just technologies which automate things. They're kind of boring. What's really interesting are the technologies which use intelligence, big data, or AI. So how do those technologies really change the ways in which we think and the ways in which we work? It might be, AI-based technologies which help us to make better decisions faster. It might be blockchain, which allows the shipping companies of the world to transport goods from one side of the world to the other in 3 days rather than 30 days, because it can automate the entire paperwork, which normally stifles that flow in the different ports of the world. Or it might be 3D printing, which can print out your personalized sushi, or maybe even print out your new 3D home within 24 hours if you so desire one. The fourth megatrend is about dense living. So the urbanization of the world. Most of the world today lives in cities. Within another 15 years, 70% of the world will live in a city. And of the 45 megacities in the world, most of them today are in Asia, places like Guangdong and Shenzhen. But if you look further ahead, the next 20, 30, 40 years, the 3 largest cities in the world will all be in Africa: Lagos, Nairobi, and Dar es Salaam. So what does that mean as we move towards these densely populated megacities? What does it mean for education, healthcare, retail? How do these communities of people work better together and have a high quality of life whilst they're crammed into relatively small places? And the final megatrend is eco or environmental renewal. The big sustainability challenges, be it inequality or climate change, which we face in the world, we recognize now that we're in a crisis situation with them. The trend is to move to a much more circular way of working. Circular in which we give back the things which we take from the world, so a circular economy as it's called, but ultimately a world which we can actually give back more than we take. We can actually create a positive impact, a net positive impact in the world today. But we can't avoid the fact that, in many ways, growth and profits are really coming up against what you might call the limits of capitalism. Just think about the Amazon rainforest, the destruction of huge amounts of the world's forests and biodiversity with it, all in the cause of having more grazing grounds for more meat. But there actually could be a better way. But we need to think about this in a joined up way. We need to think about all the different challenges and how they affect each other. So for example, if we look at reducing carbon emissions, the biggest carbon emissions today after the USA come from Asian markets where, those people are actually escaping poverty and they're rising up with their first taste of wealth in many decades or centuries. So who is it for us to say that they can't do that? So we need to find a more joined up solution in terms of all of these different challenges, be it in terms of the population growth as we head towards 9 billion people, be it the water which we consume, which will grow rapidly in terms of certainly fresh water, be it in terms of transportation and the changing nature of the energy which we use for that, or be it in terms of the biodiversity of our world. It's back in 2018 when, there was a real kind of shock to the business world when Larry Fink, he's the CEO and chairman of BlackRock's the world's largest investment company. And he said in his letter to all the CEOs of companies which he invests in, he said, "I will only continue to invest in your company if you can demonstrate a purpose which is about how you do good for the world in some way, a purpose beyond profit." And that really made companies think, because obviously investment is their lifeline. So purpose became a very powerful force in business. We've all heard that phrase. Purpose, if you look at Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, for example, is all about the why. Why do we exist as a business? But that why is a great way in which you can reframe what your company does. Don't just think about what you do, which is how most companies define themselves. You define yourself by your own capabilities. You define yourself by the products which you make. That's the sector which you place yourself in. You're a transportation company. You're a pharmaceutical company. It's what you do, the what. But actually the how has much more impact in making you stand out. How you serve people, how you make money, the business model which you use. So the hows can be actually much more powerful in differentiating you and also engaging your customers. But it's the why which really makes the difference. Why do you get up in the morning? But ultimately, why do you make the world a better place? What, if you like, would the world be like if you didn't exist? That's how you find a better answer to your why. So thinking about that why, and there's lots and lots of examples. Tesla, for example, as a car company, it's actually not just a car company. That's its what, the small circle. Tesla actually exists to accelerate the transition to clean energy. And perhaps it's no surprise, therefore, that batteries are actually a more profitable business for Tesla than the cars themselves. And actually batteries such as the million-mile battery, which is currently under development at Tesla's Gigafactory in Shanghai, is actually one of the ways which will truly make it stand out and ensure its leadership in a world of electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles. A great company, which shows off its purpose in all that it does is Patagonia, the great maker of outdoor clothing. And Yves Chouinard, when he started the company back in the 1960s, he was a passionate mountaineer. He loved to go climbing. He loved the outdoors. And actually, one of the first things he did was he created a range of equipment branded as Patagonia for mountaineers. His best-selling product was actually those metal hooks which mountaineers put into the rocks as they're climbing up, which their ropes hang on to. But he realized that those metal hoops were causing huge damage to the rock formations, creating cracks and leaving them behind to rust. So he actually decided, after a few years in business, to eliminate his most profitable business line. And over time, he's gone forwards and he said, we will only do business in things which do good, and we'll only do ways of business, ways of manufacturing, ways of selling, which are good for the world at the same time. But recently he decided that that's not enough. He's looking around the world. He sees these carbon emissions growing. He sees inequality growing. He sees politicians challenging what he believes is just and fair in the world. And he says, we actually can't wait for all of that. As a business, we need to step up and use our power as a brand, our power as a group of customers and employees to say, we actually believe in a better world. And he now defines his purpose as to say, we're in the business of saving our home planet. And that actually is a guiding theme, a North Star, if you like, by which he does everything, by which decisions are made. Does it fit within that purpose statement? Same with Tesla. Does it fit within doing that? And Patagonia is a great example of a rising group of organizations across the world which are actually called B corporations. So B corporations are companies which truly believe that purpose comes before profit, that broader stakeholders exist, and you create value for all of them rather than just a smaller number of shareholders. The B Corporation Declaration of Independence, if you read it, it says, we envision a global economy that uses business as a force for good. This economy is comprised of a new type of corporation, the B Corporation, which is purpose-driven and creates benefit for all stakers, not just shareholders. As B corporations and leaders of this emerging economy, we believe that we must be the change we seek in the world, that all business ought to be conducted as if people and place mattered, that through their products, practices and profits, businesses should aspire to do no harm and benefit all. To do so requires that we all act with understanding, that we each are dependent on each other and responsible for each other and future generations. And if you look at, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which were defined by the United Nations, look at how businesses are using them today. Together, if businesses could actually step up and say, how can we align our commercial activities with achieving these goals at the same time, that could be a $12 trillion business opportunity. A nice example of that is actually the world's largest cement company, Cemex, from Mexico. It's actually said that the Sustainable Development Goals will be the guiding model by which it develops its strategy in which it will grow its business into the future. So it starts off by looking at how can we as a cement business help to achieve all of those different things. Its purpose as a company is not just to make great cement. That's just the product. That's just the what. Actually, why Cemex exists is to build communities, to build hospitals, to build schools, to give people a better quality of life, particularly in emerging parts of the world. And so by aligning each of its activities with these sustainable development goals, it can both understand the positive impact it makes beyond profit, but it can also actually focus its effort on the things which will make a difference to achieving its purpose. Another great example, as we talked about, is Elon Musk. But one of the things about Elon Musk is actually, whatever you think of him, crazy guy in some ways, is he has tremendous vision. He really can imagine a world which is very different from today. His future potential, if you like, is quite different from many other people's. Who could imagine truly the way in which SpaceX now has rockets taking off at regular intervals, supplying cargoes to the International Space Station or launching new microsatellites, and then being able to return to Earth quickly and to be turned around and to fire off again. Or taking that a bit further, when I went to Hawthorne in California to the SpaceX factory, every person in that company believes in the bigger thing which SpaceX is trying to achieve, which is to create an alternative civilization on the planet Mars. So, we're going to Mars was the thing which they all talked about. And if you look at some of the videos which SpaceX produces, you can see how that rockets taking off and landing again are just the precursor to what that business is really about. So having a bigger goal, a bigger ambition as to what all of this stuff really fits into. So Elon Musk is a great example of a storyteller. And what I think you need in today's world as a business leader is to have a great story. So a great way to tell a story is to use these 4 different steps. Firstly, what is the situation which we find ourselves in? This is the world today. Then what is the complication with that situation? Why is the world today not enough? So what is the problem? What's the big challenge which we need to overcome in some way? And so then you kind of pose a question. So how could it be better? What if we did this? And then you have your answer, your vision, if you like. So your answer is more like, imagine if we could create a civilization on Mars. Imagine if the world's cars ran with renewable energy or clean energy. So by moving people through those 4 steps, the first 2 steps are really connecting to where they are today, but also creating dissatisfaction in their minds. The third step, the question, is really your opportunity to challenge them. It's to create a new space. It's to create a new conversation in their minds. And the answer, because you've led them through those steps, the answer is much more plausible because you've now opened their minds to being receptive to why we need to think about that vision. And that's the same process which John Lasseter and all his friends use at Pixar. Great storytellers in all sorts of different stories. But if you look at all their movies, it follows those new steps. The hero, if you like, they call it the hero's journey. The hero has some kind of challenge and they have to overcome that adversity in some way. The one thing John Lasseter says for business, which would make the story even better, is if you make it more human. So give it a character. Give it a kind of a feeling that this could be you when the audience are listening to it. And actually show how humanity can be better at the same time. So leadership today is really about much more than just delivering the business through that old type of hierarchy which Henry Ford created, where we just want standard products which are made in the same way and as consistently, as efficiently as possible. That's not the game of business today, and it's not the game of a business leader. Leaders are really here to look up, to be far-sighted, but to create better futures. And this is a model, I call it the leadership DNA. It's really about saying leaders at the most basic level, they need to create impact, hopefully positive impact. At the middle level, they need to make change happen because the world is constantly changing and change is getting faster, and we live in this relentless world. We need to both respond to that, but also anticipate and shape that at the same time. So the ultimate challenge for a leader is to create that better future, and that requires you to be inspiring, to be courageous, to be farsighted, and constantly driving progress in different ways. So leaders today shape the future. And most importantly, you shape the future you want. You shape it in your own vision. So that's what I talk about in my new book, Business Recoded. And actually there's 7 big shifts which business needs to make. Firstly, it's about achieving that enlightened progress rather than just being a profit machine. Secondly, it's about futuristic growth rather than just doing more of what you've always done. Creating new markets rather than just competing in those which already exist, defined by somebody else. Having human ingenuity rather than just innovation driven by technology. Having real ecosystems, partners working together in new ways to do things which you can never do yourselves, but you don't need to, because you can always find somebody who can help you to do that, maybe in adjacent markets to extend your offering or to actually take you to new places and to do things in different ways. It requires transformation, which is sustainable, both in sustaining the transformation, but also sustainable for the world. And it requires leaders who are not just ordinary, but now is the moment when we need extraordinary leaders. And in the book, that comes together in terms of 49 codes, which we've deconstructed by looking at the best companies all around the world and what their leaders really do. And then you can reconstruct in a way which is relevant and inspiring for your own business. So this is one of 5 programs about Business Recoded. This is Future Recoded, and there's 4 others about growth, innovation, work, and leadership. So join me again for thinking about how can we recode the future of business. So be bold, be brave, and be brilliant. And thank you for joining me.